Hier ist das erste deutsche Fernsehen mit der Tagesschau.
Holiday season is coming up and you're probably considering what camera or what gear you're gonna take with you for your travels. And since you've clicked on this video, I assume that the Fujifilm X100VI is a strong contender as a travel camera. And I have used this camera extensively for travels as a travel and street photographer. And today I want to share with you the good things and the bad things about the Fuji X100VI as a travel camera. And now I would say, let's get into it. Let's talk about this camera's ultimate strength, which is its compact size and its related pickup ability. Because when you usually have like a big setup, a few lenses, a big camera, and even my Fujifilm X-T5, I sometimes have to second guess whether I even want to take it in the first place, whether I have space for it, whether it makes sense, whether it's worth it. And that's a question I never have to ask myself when I take the X100VI, because it's so small, so compact, lightweight, it fits into every bag. I do not even need a dedicated camera bag. It's just this camera. And if you couple this with the fact that this camera is incredibly pretty, then you actually also really want to use the camera. So there is basically nothing that prevents you from taking this camera anywhere you go. And that's exactly why I have taken it to hikes in the Alps, also sometimes a few more kilometers, but I've also taken it for city trips. I've taken it for literally anything, honestly, because of its size. So the size aspect of this camera is really the X100VI's biggest asset. And the second aspect that's so impressive about this camera is that it's not only small, but it's also super capable without hardly any trade-offs that you have to make to fit all of these incredible specs into such a tiny package. So let's just briefly go through the features that I absolutely love about this camera. And the first one is the leaf shutter. And the shutter mechanism is incredibly silent. So you're not only going to be traveling lightweight, but you're also traveling very discreetly. When picking up my Fujifilm X-T5, for instance, which has already an incredibly silent shutter, then I often feel like I'm super intrusive because compared to the X100VI's shutter, the X-T5's shutter is incredibly loud. So the leaf shutter, great feature. The next feature I absolutely love about this camera, which is particularly useful for travel, I found, is the ND filter. Because the ND filter allows you to shoot at slower shutter speeds and create amazing creative effects such as the shutter drag effect, where you pan the camera at a slow shutter speed, but also for waterfalls, where you blur out the water using slower shutter speeds. And you can also enable it by simply customizing one single button on your camera instead of taking an entire ND filter set with you as you would have to do with another camera. And the next feature I absolutely love about this camera, which is particularly useful for travel, is the colors out of camera. And when there is one thing that Fujifilm is known for, then it's arguably the colors out of camera. And those can be achieved by selecting a film simulation, my favorite for instance is Classic Chrome, and then you can further customize the look of your files in the settings menu. And especially during travel where you do not necessarily want to edit, you might not have the time to edit, and you simply want to enjoy the moment, this can be super useful. And attached you can see the film recipe that I use for my JPEGs out of camera most of the time. Let's talk about battery life next, and I'm sure that many of you have just waited for this point to come up, because Fujifilm has been kind of criticized for including the smaller battery in the X100VI compared to the bigger battery that's used in a camera like the Fuji X-T5 for instance. So how does this battery actually last in practice? And based on my experience, if you're not a power user and just snapping the occasional photo, then you will be absolutely fine with this battery. But if you are a power user and you even shoot video, then one battery is probably not going to be enough. And if you now also consider external factors that can mess up battery life, such as extremely warm temperatures or extremely cold temperatures, that's also something that will drain the battery faster. In my experience, I've used it below 0 degrees and I've also used it in plus 30 degrees already. There is no overheating as such going on, but the battery will just drain a bit faster. So generally speaking, you will want to have at least one spare with you if you're a power user, and you will probably also want to think about an appropriate charging solution to actually charge your batteries. And this is exactly where today's video sponsor LLANO comes in, and LLANO has created what might be the ultimate travel charging solutions for your X100VI, because this thing is not just a charger, this is a charging case that also includes a power bank to power other devices. So in other words, you can charge up to 2 X100 batteries at once, and it doubles as a 12,400 mAh power bank with a dual 20-watt output. So this thing is powerful enough to even charge phones easily, and even my MacBook I've already charged with it. And since I personally travel with 2 spare batteries, I used to just toss them somewhere in my bag until one of them got damaged. But since I have LLANO's charging solution, I actually just store my batteries, whether they're being charged or not, in the charging station, which is another neat thing. And prior to getting LLANO's charging solution, I had to charge all my batteries in camera, which led to 2 problems. First of all, I did not know which one was charged and which one was not. And the second problem was that I simply forgot to swap the batteries in camera for overnight charging, leading to only partially charged batteries when starting into the new day. But with LLANO's charging station, I never ever have to worry again about empty batteries, because I can first of all charge them all at once, and I can see to what extent they have already been charged through the LED screen included in the power bank. So if you're looking for neat charging solutions that gets all your batteries for the X100VI charged, then I highly recommend you check out LLANO's charging solutions, and thanks so much to LLANO for sponsoring this week's video. But now let's get back to the video, and previously we've talked how external factors like heat or extreme cold can affect battery life, but there is another thing regarding external aspects which you can probably not influence, which is whether it's going to rain. And rain-wise, this camera is weather sealed, but under one condition, which is that you put an extra adapter in front of your lens so that your lens is well weather sealed throughout, because the lens itself is actually not weather sealed out of the box, which is a bummer, but at least there is a solution for it. And I've actually linked you my preferred weather sealing hood down below, so feel free to check it out. Another key feature of this camera is its lens, and the first reason why its lens is so good is because of its focal length. It's a 35mm full-frame equivalent lens, which means that it's a moderately wide-angle lens, which allows you to capture the entire scene while not having too much in your scene, like on a 28 or 24mm lens, which will then clutter your scene and makes your composition less concise. The second really neat tool about this lens is that its aperture is f2, which gives you 2 benefits. First of all, you can actually use it for portraits and blur out your background by shooting at a wider aperture like f2, but at the same time f2 is also very good to shoot in low light, because it means that more light is going to reach your sensor, meaning that you have to raise the ISO less far, which leads to cleaner images even when you shoot in low light, which really just enhances the versatility of this setup. And now let's get to the problematic that makes me doubt whether the X100VI is the right travel camera for me. And the key issue many of us face is the question of how much gear to take, which is an issue that can be completely alleviated when taking the X100VI, as that thing does not even have interchangeable lenses. And on the one hand, you could argue that less is more, just one camera, one lens, it's super lightweight, requires no dedicated photography backpack, and removes the need to make gear decision, which means that you can dedicate all the creativity to the scene you have in front of you without having to think about whether you have the right lens for the scene. Additionally, the limitation to one single focal length can be creatively liberating and has given me better photos. But sometimes when I use the X100VI, I crave something different. I crave something tighter, like an 85mm lens, for instance. I crave something that gives me blurrier background, just a completely different look, and also just simply some alternation from the photos that I would usually take on the 35mm lens. And this brings me to the second philosophy, the flexible but minimal approach. 1 interchangeable lens camera and 2 carefully chosen primes. For example, I would go with a 35mm and an 85mm. They cover almost everything but serve very much distinct purposes, avoiding the overlap and the mental conflict you might get when choosing between, let's say, a 35mm and a 50mm. The downsides, well, first you'll carry a bit more than with the less is more approach and the X100VI. And the second problem is that the X100VI won't work since it doesn't even have interchangeable lenses, and effectively the X100VI becomes the worst camera if you choose that specific approach. And recently I posted a poll to my Instagram story where I asked my followers what setup they would choose. Only the X100VI or another camera and 2 lenses. And honestly, the field was divided, like almost 50-50. But which camera would you choose? Only the X100VI or another camera with 2 interchangeable lenses? Let me know in the comment section down below. But if you're a great contender of the less is more philosophy, then the X100VI is absolutely an amazing camera, an absolute powerhouse, small and compact, great photos out of camera. And if you want to learn how to compose in the best way possible on the 35mm lens, then I highly invite you to check out this video up here, in which I tell you how to get the absolute most out of this focal length. And with that being said, I hope this video was useful, and I hopefully see you in next week's video. Bye.